Okay, we're ready to get started.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get started with our next session. For those of you who don't know it, and I'll let him introduce himself as well as everybody else. But Al Hahn is the executive director of the Association of Support Professionals, and we've got a great roundtable discussion coming up here. The top 10 support websites has been something that's been going on. I don't know, Al, you can talk about how long it's been going on and all that, but this is kind of a derivative of that. We wanted to bring this group in here to talk about the website, support website. Al, I'm going to turn it over to you, and it's all yours.
Okay. Well, I run the Association of Support Professionals. We've been partnering a lot with TSANet in the last year and a half. We have a lot of synergy, but we don't duplicate what each other does. We have many members on our boards that are from the same companies. Like, for example, Deepak and Scott are on the TSANet board, and they're also some of our best website award winners. Ryan is on our board, and actually another person from Red Hat, Paul Lyons, who is listening, is on our board. And then we have lovely people like Francoise. And Francoise, you have to unmute yourself, please.
You should be able to hear me, yes?
Yes. So okay. I took over about 9 years ago from Jeff Tarter, our founder. We've been around, gosh, I don't know, I've lost track, 25 years, maybe something like that. And we've been having a competition for best support websites. This year will be our 22nd year. We changed the name last year from Top 10 to ASP Best Support Websites because we began to be a little nervous about just honoring the 10 numerical scores and wanted to take a closer look at other things. So we did honor the top 5 scores, and both NetApp and Nutanix were among the top 5. Red Hat got honored for a different thing, and that is for making the best contribution to the industry over the last decade or two. I've actually lost track, Scott, how many decades you guys have been doing this, but they submit an essay every year. You don't have to submit an essay if you don't want to, but you can. Their essays are a virtual tutorial on state-of-the-art in support websites. So you want to know what you should be doing, read their essay. I've learned a lot by reading them. I'm sure that countless other people have read a lot by reading them. And Red Hat, as you know, has done a lot of things, not just in support websites, but through TSANet. And I was just noticing their involvement in the regional group in India, leading the engineer education there. So you guys have been pretty good corporate citizens in support for a long time, Scott. So let me go around and introduce everybody. So Deepak Chawla is Senior VP of Worldwide Support at Nutanix. Why don't you raise your hand there for a second? Scott Froelich is the Director of Customer Experience and Engagement. That's a big mouthful of things that says that somebody thinks you're pretty good at what you do, Scott. And Scott, as I mentioned, and Deepak are both on the TSANet board. Ryan Matthews is Director of Digital Support at NetApp. NetApp's another good contributor all over the place. But Ryan has been an award winner with us at 2 different companies, right, Ryan?
Yes, sir.
So I would say that anybody that gets a chance to get their hands on him is doing themselves a favor. Because in his last job before NetApp, he won the award as a small company, and that small company had better scores than most of the large and medium-sized companies in our competition. So, that's harder to do with less resources. So obviously, he's a winner that knows how to hit the ball out of the park. If you would be a DH in the major leagues, I think.
Well, thanks, Al.
And then we have, last but not least, and it's only because I'm doing him in alphabetical order, Francoise. Otherwise, I would have introduced you first. But Francoise Tournier is, first of all, she's a great person. I've gotten to know you a bit over the years, and you really are a fine human being. But also, she has written the book on support. Well, she's written more than one, but the one that she's probably best known for is called The Art of Support. She's consulted with just about anybody that ever needed help in improving their support, but particularly on their support websites. And the other panelists all said if I had a trick question, I should give it to her because nobody can fool her. So I may have a trick question for you later. I said I wouldn't do that, but I figured out a way to sugarcoat it.
Okay.
So anyway, let's start off. Actually, I'd like each of you to tell our group a little bit more about what you do. I mean, I can give your titles, but let's start with you, Deepak. Again, we'll stay in alphabetical order. Tell people what you actually do besides, we see the golf balls and mugs in the background. So obviously you play golf, but what consumes your time at Nutanix?
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Al. So I've been at Nutanix almost 8 years now, and when we started, it was basically it was a small company, a couple of hundred people, 10 people sitting in San Jose. That was the support team. Right now, we've got a pretty large-scale organization across 9 centers globally. Follow 24/7, follow the sun. So I manage that. But there are 2 other pieces that I manage, which are equally important. One is the escalation function, because things do go wrong sometimes, very, very wrong, and coordination between multi-vendors and making sure that we are managing the account and providing the communication both to internal and external stakeholders. So that's within my purview. And finally, and not the least, is support readiness, right? Preparing the community as well as our support engineers to be ready when a new product goes out, making sure that the right bugs are being fixed in the right releases, training all of the support engineers, maintaining the support labs, etc. Just being kind of the single face to support.
Well, I called out some of the achievements of Ryan and Scott, but I don't want to short you, Deepak. If I recall correctly, you guys have won 3 awards from us for your support website, right?
That's right. We've applied 3 times and we've won 3 awards. So we are batting, 1,000 right now. And again, we don't apply every year because we don't think we're making substantial changes every year, right? But every time we make a change, and to get really great feedback from panelists such as Francois and David Kay, etc., it's always good to kind of measure ourselves on a yardstick and see what else can we be doing better. So at the appropriate times we do.
Okay, let's move on to Scott. So Scott, I mentioned you have kind of a mouthful in your title, customer experience and engagement. Now the engagement is kind of intriguing to me. That implies almost a whole new dimension. But anyway, tell people what you actually do every day.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Al. It's a pleasure to be here with this group. It's a pretty accomplished team here you've got on the panel today. But from a Red Hat perspective, I've been with Red Hat about 3 years now. I like to say 3 years new when people ask. It's been a great ride so far. As the leader of customer experience and engagement, so I run basically across 4 regions. So that's kind of how we split the globe up. I run customer service, customer success, escalation management, and support delivery. And what we have basically done is taken those functions and figure out how do you kind of mesh that organization? How do people figure out what their swim lanes are? How do you own that customer experience and the way you engage them post the sales cycle? So that's really kind of the foundation of when we think about customer experience and engagement.
Okay. Well, welcome back to each one of you. So Ryan, you're next. I've already kind of bragged about what a winner you are, but tell people what you actually wind up doing.
Sure. So I'm a director of digital support here at NetApp, and I got the advantage of really kind of looking at our customer experience from the outside in and being able to influence and affect positive change across the various points in time that make that happen. So I own the knowledge strategy. How do we develop content for our support site, which is super important anytime you want to build an audience online. I've also got ownership of our many-to-many channel, so our community, as well as our KB site, and finally stitching all that together in a cohesive user experience around our support site. So making all that hum across company the size of NetApp has been a lot of fun. I've been here about 3 years. And before that, really, it was the same model, but you know, a little bit smaller of a company, less resources. But I think those best practices really apply once you kind of figure out and dial in what users care about. And you know, it's pretty simple, right? They want a low effort, high quality experience, and in a complex system environment, B2B space, they want to get back to doing their day job, right? They didn't wake up in the morning looking to have a problem. They want it solved quickly and get back to what they're doing. So that's our focus.
Well, you make it sound simple. I don't think it really is that simple, but we can all wish, can't we? So, Francois, do you think it's that simple?
Well, no, it's really hard. As usual, the principle is really obvious, and the details are really complicated, right? And I want to come back to something that Ryan said. You mentioned that they won when they had you said a small company. I don't think it was that small, but smaller, right? And then they won again, right, at NetApp. And I think the thing to remember when we talk about websites is that you can do a fantastic job as a small company. And that's something to remember, right? And the reason why you can do a fantastic job is that you know your users very well, right? Your users will tend to be very homogeneous, right? They all kind of sort of looking for the same experience. So you don't have to worry about, okay, I have 20 product lines and 5 different kinds of personas, and oh my God, we're launching this great automated bot, and where do I put it on my website? And it becomes very complicated, right? Whereas when you are small, you can be very focused, and also you can execute much faster. I'm sure Ryan would agree to that. And therefore, you can have a fantastic experience as a small player, which is much harder to do in other ways.
So for the 3 people that don't know who you are and what you do, tell them what you do.
All right. So what I do, obviously, my team does website designs. I'm very passionate about that. But we, in general, we help technology companies improve their support and customer success operations. I call it the 5 layers, right? So the 5 layers would be offerings. What is it that we deliver to customers? Do we do premium support? Do we do whatever, right? Second is all about processes. So we're talking today about self-service, obviously, but assisted support is part of that, right? The third part is people. About a third of our business is customer skills training, so working with people who are directly working with customers. And then the other 2 are tools, so selecting tools, implementing tools, and the last one is metrics, dashboards, etc.
Well, to be fair, I should mention that you are one of 2 of the best and best known consultants in the business, the other being your friend and mine, David Kay. And I recommend both of them to anybody that needs help, but I sometimes recommend them one or the other depending on specifically what the client needs. And you 2 are both extremely competent. Both of you know just about everything that was ever thought about support, but you also have your different strengths and can help people in various ways, and can have done that for certainly far longer than I've been with ASP, and pretty much, well, I'm a bit older than you, so not as long as I've been in support, but pretty close. So anyway, you alluded to my first question, which is for all of you. So any one of you can jump in on the answer. We want to have this be an ongoing discussion as much as possible. The question is, things have changed over the years. They continue to evolve. We've had some radical changes with the pandemic and all kinds of stuff going on in the past year. But how important do you feel that self-service is in support today?
Right, so I'll start. I think the importance of self-service is increasing every day. I don't know if the pandemic had a lot to do with it. I think most companies adopted to that pretty well, even though all of the agents were working from home, etc. I think there was enough infrastructure available for them to do a pretty good job. But regardless of that, I think our customers, and this is not just the millennials, but pretty much all of the customer base in the tech industries has been moving more and more towards self-service, right? They want their answer quickly, and they want it to be the right answer. And I always give the silly example that I've got an HP printer sitting behind me, and if something goes wrong, my first instinct is not to call HP support, right? I will go to Google, I will go to YouTube. There must be someone who has had that problem, and there's probably a solution that exists. And customers want to be self-sufficient, and they want to solve problems themselves. So to me, a support website really represents a portal where customers can go and get all of the solutions to at least the simple problems, the repetitive problems, etc. And of course, not to diminish the importance of support agents. Those are still needed for the complex issues, for the multi-vendor issues and such. But to have the support website as a first line of defense, and a very good support website at that, is paramount to the success of the company and the customers.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Deepak. I think I would just add to your point by simply saying a lot of our customers will want to multitask through that experience as well. And that's where the support site allows them to do that versus being locked into a phone, locked into experience, doing the remote session, et cetera. You know, they're out there, they're maybe doing some work on the side, they do a search, oh, I'll come back and read this in 5 minutes, and I'll do this. And then so I think that time tasking nature of our society and how we've evolved towards that has really driven the need for people to think about that, the way they engage with solutions. I think a key for all of us as we think about it is, how do you then flow that customer from that experience in their journey back towards your company and all of the content that you have? If you found it on Google, how do you flow it in? If you found it in a forum somewhere else, how do you flow that in? You know, how do all points lead back to kind of to demonstrate the knowledge and the skills that your company has in that space to the broader community as well?
Anybody else?
Well, I definitely build on that sentiment of, you know, if you're truly bold and you're wondering how important your self-service is, you should turn it off for a day and see what happens, right? I mean, I think there was somebody out there who actually de-indexed their community and as an experiment from Google, and did it for a short period of time, and the amount of cases that came in were pretty staggering. And you know, I was impressed by the boldness of just trying that, but they did it kind of on purpose to see if they could get an understanding of value. And that's the reality, is that I think, you know, we as an industry have to stop thinking about self-service and community and Google searches and whatever as an either or proposition, right? People move through these things in multi-channel endeavors, and you know, sometimes they're looking for questions that they would never care enough to call you about. Sometimes they're looking for multiple points of validation. Hey, I saw this in the KB. I saw this on a competitor site. You told me this. It's important to me. I'm going to lose my job if I do this wrong. I want 5 points of validation, right? So I think the reality is that, you know, the way I think about it anyway is our digital support, whether you're looking at a particular web property or just the totality of it, is a, you know, an enabler, right? And one way to think about it is, however many engagement you have coming in through assisted support, can you have 30 times, 40 times, 50 times that in those other channels, because you know that answers are being proliferated. And as long as you ensure consistency and you're quick to react when you get negative feedback, I think that's the way to think about it. It's not either or, right? They're hitting all of those things at once, and you really have to manage and make sure, as Scott pointed out, that they can seamlessly move through there and not get lost.
Well, Francois, you brought it up. Let's see if you can weigh back in.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is I completely agree with what was said, that it's really about digital support or self-service support. It's not necessarily about the website, because very few people will actually start on the website. I'm working right now with a client, the name of which shall remain a mystery, and we are totally obsessing about the landing page, right? What's going to be on the landing page, and is it going to be blue or green or whatever? Or is it? It is important. I'm not trying to say it's not, but the reality is 30-50% of the traffic is going to come in another way, right? So we really have to think of it as, how do people access our knowledge base with a very expensive view, right? how do they access our stuff, right, without needing to start on the landing page? That's one idea. Again, just emphasizing what has been said already. The second thing that I'm seeing is that many of the clients we work with have some kind of a SaaS product. So if we have a SaaS product, then we're going to be in the product, right? The customer is going to be in the product, right? And why would they need to do something completely different to go and get support? I find that just absolutely remarkable, that we really need to bring these two environments together, especially because a lot of my clients have product management systems already, right? Right, where the admin is in there, right? And then the support website is kind of separate, and I'm thinking we need to bring these things together. I'm not saying it's easy, but we really need to think of it not as the support website on a little pedestal there, but a nexus, right, where all kinds of other activities can lead to it. And that's not easy, of course.
Yeah, our friend Jennifer talks about this in terms of a part of digital transformation, which has to go across the entire enterprise, right?
Right.
Yeah, Jennifer McIntosh. Sorry, I should have added her last name. But so yeah, that's a bigger thing, and it does move across everything. It should. It does. It doesn't tend to actually happen that way. It tends to happen in fits and starts, but in any case, we'll keep moving along here. So many people, there's a continuum out there. I mean, people like yourselves, work with very wonderful support, pretty sophisticated, been doing it for a while. You've got most of the bells and whistles covered, but some people just starting out. I was thinking about that because we're going to help our members, and if TSANet's going to help its members, we have to work across the spectrum of what everybody's needs are. So there are always startups coming along, and so some people they're not ready for the big time, sophisticated stuff. They want blocking and tackling basic things. So just to have a good self-service website, what does that take? And not great, but just good enough to survive. Don't all speak at once. It scares me when
All
you
right. So I'll go again. Yeah. So I think again, as you said, it's a continuum, right? And we hope that over the 10 years that we've been building our website, that we've gotten to some level of greatness. Absolutely not in all aspects, but I'll talk about the second generation website that we built maybe a few years ago, and I'd call that a pretty decent website. So again, if you are going to be coming into the portal or you're going to be coming into the company website, one thing that is paramount is you've got to have very crisp, very wonderful search, right? You cannot invest on search, because you want customers, partners, even employees to be able to find what they are looking for the first time and not be stymied because the indexing was wrong, or you got 30 results before and the 31st one was what you were looking for, right? So it should be intuitive. It should be, and natural language processing, by the way, is the way to go, right? To be able to find the things that you're looking for. The other piece that I would say is for the customers to have a reasonably personalized experience. Of course, you've got to have the knowledge base, you have got to have the documents, the product, the patches, everything available all in one place, right? So they don't have to jump from place to place. But in addition to that, you want to give them a decent experience. The website and the vendor must know what the customers has purchased, right? And to be able to give them some level of personalization here are the assets that you own from us that we know about. Here are the contract dates. Here's the cases that you have opened with us. Here's the NPS or customer sat that you have provided to us. So the customer knows what the relationship history has been and not having to think about, hey, did I open this kind of a case 3 months ago when I had a similar problem, etc. They should be able to find those things on a more personalized manner rather than have to search through the entire knowledge base, etc. So yeah, and of course, then a place to create cases as well, right? So they shouldn't have to jump to a different place to be able to open their own cases, etc. Today at Nutanix, we get almost 65% of our cases open through the portal because it's easy for customers to do that. They can attach logs, etc., so that when a support engineer actually gets a case, they can hit the ground running. But more importantly, even as they're opening the case, we actually have a very Google-like experience where a panel opens up with the terms as they're typing to say, hey, here are all the knowledge base articles. Here are all the field alerts that we sent out on this particular term. And our hope is that the customer will say, oh yeah, this is exactly the problem I'm having. Click on it, solve their case, and not have to go back and actually open that case, right? And that's how we measure part of our case deflection as well.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in there?
I think I'd go a bit of a different direction. I would kind of say, you know, your level of commitment to resourcing a support site is going to go to kind of what you're able to achieve, right? You've got to think of it as, you know, at Red Hat, we have a lot of resources. So we really do focus on this. We think that experience on the website is one of the key things. I think our phone-in rate, it's the low single digits, right? So the number of people actually have to pick up the phone. So we feel like our site is very effective at kind of taking people through that journey and really helping them self-solve. If they can't, then it's engaging with our customer experience and engagement organization. But essentially, if you're really committed, you're thinking about, okay, do I have teams in place such that I can do structure? Can I do mock-ups and do reviews on mock-ups? Can I do A/B testing on where I do placements of different things to see where it's more effective at? Am I doing the analytics behind the website as well? And all of this is just foundational to figure out, okay, how do I start at being good? And then if I want to head towards being great, how do I get down that path, right? So I think those are really, really key in the way you think about it as a leader on how you resource those things. Because if you don't do that, you'll struggle down this path for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're going in rotation, so let's stick to it. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to be good, you know, I would encourage you to be great and call FTWorks or Francois and like actually strive for greatness. I just think this is an area of differentiation, and like to shoot for good is you're selling yourself short. So I actually say don't shoot for good. You need to shoot for great. And what a great website is, you do everything, the simple stuff really well. I think what greater and the greatest websites do is they continue to, you know, ease out the friction. And I think that at the end of the day, you know, what makes a bad website is that, you know, there's lots of dead ends, there's no content, it's a ghost town. If you can avoid those things and build an audience, especially in today, I mean, think about today's world, right? Like nobody has any attention span for anything. So if you build an audience online, you've done a great job. That's probably a really good website. And you need to learn what brought people in and what they're successful, and then do more of that and make it easier and easier and easier. So usability testing, analytics, you know, great search. I mean, all these things are kind of table stakes, but you don't need them. You can't buy them, right? It's not like you can go buy all these things and kind of piece it together. I just think you have to be committed to saying, look, this is where people want to engage us. And we're crazy if we want to make this a bad or just an okay experience. We want to make it a great experience.
So I love what Ryan just said, because I was thinking, you know, Al, you asked us about what makes a good website, and I bet your next question is going to be what makes a great website, right? And like Ryan, I'm like, it might be a matter of degree, right? But the basics have got to be there. And like the other guys, for a living, I look at crappy websites. So my issue is not, you know, how do I go from good to great? My issue is often, not always, but often, how do I go from non-existent or really terrible or very neglected, right, to something that people will actually use without holding their nose, right? So to me, there are three things that make a good website. And the problem is they are not things that you can see. There are things that you need to do before you get there, right? So the three things are, do you know who's using your website? So in other words, we'll call it personas, right? Who is coming to your website, right? Are they system administrators? Are they partners? Are they individual users? Are they users of this product or that product? Are they school teachers? Are they nurses? Whatever, right? Who is using your website? You need to know that very well, and there could be more than one, right? Second is, what do they want to do? Right? Do they want to do a search? I mean, Deepak started and said, we need to have a great search. And I'm like, hallelujah, of course we need to have a great search. But not everybody likes the search, right? And sometimes when I work with, less sophisticated audiences, they're actually terrible searchers. So we need to help them in other ways, right? So what are the tasks they need to do? And are we able to do these tasks with the terrible back-end office that we have? Right, Deepak? Like, do you know what I bought from you? That's often a very difficult problem for at least the customers I work with. We don't even know that, right? So that's the second layer. Second layer is the task. What do they want to do? And then the third thing is what Ryan was talking about, is the path to the task, right? Is it easy to do all of this, right? Can I, without thinking, right, can I navigate my way to doing an RMA, for example, or navigate my way to whatever it is that I want to do, download some software or whatever it is. Again, you need the tasks, right, well defined. And if you do these three things, eventually you'll be great, right? It's just a matter that you may need to work up to it a little bit, right? But that's the way I like to organize that: personas, tasks, and paths.
Last year in 2020, I was, I get the best ringside seat you could ever want in terms of how the competition goes, because the judges don't see the other judges' scores. The companies don't see what everybody else is doing. I get to see all of it. And I monitor it pretty closely because, first of all, I want to make sure all the judges get their scores in on time, and they're kind of like herding cats because we call them independent judges for a reason. They are very independent. But it was really, I was struck that two companies were very much in the top 5 as the scoring went along in the competition. And one brand new one to us, a company called PowerSchool, was actually in first place in the scoring. And we don't publish, who's in first or second, but we do publish this last year, the top 5, before that, the top 10. But I was watching, and they got knocked out of first eventually by a couple of senior judges who are a little less forgiving than some other judges, maybe, if they have all the experience in the world times 10. And I was kind of happy in a way to see it, but they still came in the top 5, and 2 small companies landed in the top 5 scorers. That's Republic Wireless and PowerSchool. And what really struck me is that both of those companies essentially run support, their online support, through their community. So they lead with the community. I mean, we all have communities, and ASP has been advocating communities for over 2 decades. But it still struck me that here are these 2 small companies that turned in extremely noticeably powerful performance. We look at 22 different areas on the website. Our judges are frankly pretty merciless. And these guys led the scoring for a while and finished in the top 5 as small companies, where we had, the likes of Red Hat, Nutanix, and NetApp, and others, large companies, in there fighting for their place. And I was amazed that both of these companies, the thing that they most had in common was the fact that they led with their community. And they have obviously very, very powerful communities. This has been going on for a long time, but today, to some degree, it's still kind of, I can't say new, but the power of it, I think, is still, to me, new. I was struck by it. Is anybody else struck by that? Does it resonate with any of you?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first here. Break up the pattern a little bit, I guess. I mean, obviously, Red Hat, open source, founded on the idea of communities, right? So for us, it's about meeting your customer kind of where they're at, right? So we meet them in both the open source communities, but we also meet them kind of in our, we come and say, okay, how do you take a community project and make it enterprise grade so I can run it for 10 years, right? And that's really the subscription value that Red Hat brings to that equation. So we're both meeting them in the community, because we have a lot of customers as well that participate in those same communities of software that also come into our own systems and participate there. So I'm really glad to hear that there were two players that basically came in and said, we can drive support through our communities, because it's a very powerful opportunity, right? And when I think when customers know you like that and have a sense of you, I think it's good. And I think you can use a forum to do the same type of thing. And I think as long as you figure out what the value propositions are for your customers, so what are they really looking for? I can give you an example. 50% of the time, somebody who comes to a Red Hat site is looking for documentation, right? I know that number off the top of my head. I looked it up today just to make sure I had a number that was moderately accurate. But essentially, then you've got to make sure that from that, almost a Ryan statement about ease out the friction, right? From that community or that forum, can you get to that documentation? Can you make that cross linkage? Is it easy for your customers to do? If you can do that, all the power to you in implementing that and going with it. And I think it's likely even easier for somebody in that small space who's coming up to speed to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and try this, and try it. And if you fail fast, because you don't want your phones to ring off the hook.
Yeah. So
go ahead, Deepak.
Well, no, I was just going to add a point to this. So absolutely, I think it's the questions kind of issues, right, that I think are a lot more tuned to the community, where a customer has a question that can be answered by other customers or partners, etc. Right. So it's the knowledge of many, and that obviates the need to open a case, right? So absolutely reducing the friction and finding the answer where it's available. The other piece where I find, especially with complex products or a product in a stack, etc., is that a lot of times other customers have more knowledge about the solution than the vendor themselves may have, right? So you're running XYZ database in a virtual environment running on top of Nutanix or a storage product connected to a network, etc. And they say, oh, with this particular combination, I've seen things slow down, etc. Right? So, I mean, the QA communities are in any vendor's organization are somewhat limited, right, in terms of the matrix that they test, etc. But you may find 10 other customers that have done exactly the same thing, found the issue, and been able to solve it themselves. So it's the usability kind of issues that I think, again, are very well designed to be solved in a community. And we've all learned from it. Even as vendors, we've learned from it because we didn't have that knowledge that customers were able to impart to us. And then as you stated, right, it's the relationship building and the trust. If another customer says it, right, it's not just marketing fluff, right? They're saying it because they were able to solve a problem or they were able to help. And the credibility then builds, and the customers are a lot willing to take advice from a community and then build it into their solution rather than depend upon the vendor for everything and get frustrated if the vendor doesn't have an exact answer to a complex query that they might have.
Anybody else?
Yeah, that co-creation point's a great one. And I guess Al had an unfair advantage of this particular question, just my time at Republic. But what I think the major takeaway there for the industry in those two examples that you just gave is, is not to look at it from a technical system perspective. There is a big CRM out there who tried to shift everything into community and call it a support site and everything. it even confused the definition of community, in my opinion, but I'm not bitter about that. But I think the up-leveling a little bit of the takeaway there is community management, right? If we look at kind of how the internet has evolved, right? We thought that there would be just thousands of different independent groups and everybody would find a niche, and what happened was systems got really big. So the Facebooks, the Googles, the Amazon, the Apples, right? They became big aggregators of audiences. And I think as we look forward into the future, what we're going to find is that, you have these big entities that made user experience great and people and aggregated huge audiences. But there's a lot of friction when you put all these people together, right? Look at all the animosity in society that we see around the world. And so I think what we're going to start to see is you end up having multiple different communities that you connect with. And maybe some of it is on, a chat service that you use. Sometimes it's through professional communities. Sometimes it's through Reddit. And I think the takeaway there is really, we have to build these sites and these experience for human. And those companies that you just called out, even with limited resources, do a wonderful, amazing job at community management. They know their people, they know their users, they're attentive to them, and they cultivate that, and they're able to orchestrate that. And I think that's the secret, is that, when you look at your product, like there's a NetApp Reddit forum that we monitor and watch. It has nothing to do with our company, right? It's kind of organically, the internet has created it, but it's very instructive. We watch it, we learn from it. We try to facilitate. We have members that are part of our community, that are part of the Reddit forum, that are part of the support site. So I think it's all about opt-in experiences, and you're not trying to control any of this stuff. You're just trying to make sure that you monitor and watch and observe and listen and learn, and you just continually do that, because that's where all your innovation and improvements come from. So I think you have to be open to this multivariable approach where you can create communities and kind of have people have different connection points and different almost personalities within that particular engagement. And I mean, look at the Red Hat, the open source culture that they've tapped into and kind of cultivated into their business is another great example of what you want to do there. And those small companies you just did have done something similar, but on a much smaller scale.
Yeah, I would add that it's important to understand how your customers want to engage with the community, right? Some people are going to be very happy to be lurkers, right? They're going to look at stuff, but they will never contribute, even a question, right? And this is where Deepak told us, first thing he said, right? We need to have a good search function. The search function needs to search the knowledge base, right? So the community, so that, all these good answers are exposed, right? And then some people will just go in and ask questions. And then some people will actually provide answers, and those might be very different personas. And I think the problem that we have is we assume that everybody is going to contribute and do that, and it's not true. So either we find those people who will contribute within our customer base, or we provide it ourselves. A little bit of both, probably.
Yeah, well, I've had interesting discussions over the years with people who were entering our website contest or thinking about it, and some of them complaining that they didn't have a community because they felt that their customers were all competing with each other and they didn't want to share, and they didn't feel they should be penalized because they didn't have it. And I happen to think differently, that they're missing, that company was missing out. But takes all kinds, and there's room for all kinds of opinions. I still am very much an advocate of communities. And I think, Ryan, you sort of said it, which is that in particular for the small companies, that maybe it's a little easier to know their customers for them. Francois said that. It helps them to have a better self-support website and a better experience for their customers, because they can get more power out of letting users help each other without having everybody on the payroll. I mean, you have, as you remember from when you were a public, you couldn't hire everybody in the world, right? You didn't have the kind of resources that you have where you are now. And getting that leverage, which has been known to support organizations for over 2 decades, by the way. So sometimes amazed why it takes so long for people to figure it out. But I'm sure I will still get questions and complaints about it, but our esteemed judges do a good job of working out what we should be looking at and how to award the points, and what the actually the priorities need to be so that the points are apportioned according to their importance in making a good self-service experience. So we did a major, some of you are judges, we did a major reshuffling of the areas and the point structure a couple of years ago because I wanted to make sure it was tracking with all the changes going on. We still continue to look at that every year. We'll continue to evolve the competition. So let me shift the focus a little bit to the competition. Deepak, you mentioned you tend to come in every 2 years because when you've had more changes. Others of you, like NetApp and Red Hat, come in every year. So there's different viewpoints. I appreciate all of them, and I get to know you guys and understand what's going on. But Scott, I would say Red Hat's probably been one of the most consistent in entering the contest every year. Why do you guys do that?
No, great question. So I like to think of it like this. Building out the application itself makes you think about the purposeful things that you did to drive improvement. So obviously you go out and we create OKRs and we create actions around those OKRs. And but basically it's as we go through and build kind of the process of kind of going through and we bulletize, like I think we've got all bullets together on an application now. I actually read through our 2021 application, which is due next month, right? And I was looking at that and it was interesting to see, right? Because it allows us to go back and look at prior feedback, and we go back multiple years. We look at feedback, we assess that, we say, have we made improvements in this space? Do we feel like we're where we need to be? Did we not articulate it well in the last one and really the complexities of what we were trying to do? We come back and we talk about the focuses that we've had from our objectives and key results that we've done over the coming year, and then we highlight those, go into our challenges and our emphasis areas. It really allows us to put together a whole mindset around where are we going in our customer experience through our portal, right? And the kind of that unified Red Hat property experience. It also allows us, the feedback we get is invaluable because then we can take that. It's almost like you're paying a group of experts a very small amount of money to basically give you an expert analysis of your website. Who wouldn't want that, right? From a Red Hat perspective, it's an absolute no-brainer.
Okay, so Ryan, you get to weigh in. You've seen it now from two different companies' perspectives, and you tend to enter every year. Why?
It's probably not in my best interest to convince everybody to do the same thing. That's more competition every year, Al. So that's no. In all seriousness, it was a little scary for our team. We transitioned a website, and so we had entered the competition basically of the last year of a support site and the first year of a support site. And we definitely worked with Francois and her team at FT Works on our new website. But it was interesting because we're kind of doing that in the background as we're at the same time submitting what we knew would be a site that was sunsetted. And my team was like, why are we doing this? This is crazy. Like, why are we submitting our old stuff? And for me, it goes back to a simple philosophy. There's a great book out there called Rocket Surgery Made Easy by Steve Krug. It's about usability testing and the concept of usability testing. And his philosophy there is, when you get done usability testing, you can always do a tweak here and there to improve the user experience. And then at the same time, start planning for the long term and maybe more transformational type work that you have to do that has a longer time horizon. And I think the reality is if you can gauge improvement on both of those things, and your annual competition kind of helps us do that. So that's what we did. We made tweaks, even though the site was being sunsetted. We submitted. We worked on the new one. We rolled it out. We submitted. We made changes to that in the following year. We submitted. So it's that feedback loop, and that's that constant ability to tweak and improve. And I think it just shows an organizational commitment to continual improvement. And it's part of, the scorecard, right? How do we gauge success? You do it through analytics, you do it through user feedback, you do it through industry, scrutiny, all that stuff. You need to be open for that feedback. And Deepak obviously and his team do that the same thing, whether they ready an essay or not. I think, is whether you do it every 2 years or 1 year, it's still the same philosophy. You're always fighting for feedback because you want to make it better.
Let's hear from a judge. So Francoise, you're one of our preeminent judges. You actually, a lot of people don't realize this. You're a judge. David Kay's a judge. Arndt van Oosterfjord, who's the global head of training and certification for the KCS Academy, is a judge. I mean, we have some pretty accomplished judges who obviously know everything there is to know about self-support websites. What do you feel is the value of the judging?
Okay, so first I will contradict you and say we don't know everything there is to know. We learn every time we look at a website, and that's one of the reasons why I'm a judge, is to learn, right? And to see what amazing things people are doing out there. I think the value of having the assessment is exactly what Ryan was talking about, is to have this continuing view, right, of how am I stacking up this year? I mean, even if you win 1 year, right, things will change in the next year, right? And people will say, oh, yeah, that was great back then, but it's no longer great. I mean, just as an exercise, if we pulled any of the big winners' website from 5 years ago, we would all weep probably, right? Okay, secondly, I get a lot of phone calls from people who say, hey, FT, how do I win the ASP competition? I used to get those calls a lot when it was the 10 best, right? And to me, it was like, you're kind of missing the point. I mean, yes, winning is wonderful. Love winning. You know, anytime I can win, I love to do that. But it's not quite there, right? It's, let's assess where you are. And as judges, we understand that some things are in process. That's fine, right? We understand that some vendors are small and some vendors are very large, right? We understand all of that. So it's really an assessment rather than purely a competition. Of course, some people do win. The one thing I really like about judging is that we do not judge alone. Right, so Al has this very complex algorithm, which I don't want to know about, which prevents us from judging our own clients' websites, obviously, right, or rejudging every year the same people, etc. Right, but the reality is there are multiple judges who look at each website, and for me, what I'm most interested in is what are the other judges saying and seeing that I may not be seeing, because everybody has a different view of it. So to me, this idea that you get not one opinion, but opinions from various folks, I think that's really cool. And I want to reiterate one last time that every time I judge, I learn something, every single time.
So Deepak, Francoise just touched on probably what I think is the most important part of the competition. It's not, I mean, yes, a few people win trophies, and we upgraded them last year to Crystal, which is nice, I think. But I don't know, maybe Scott, you ought to start giving us the old ones back so we can recycle them. We've got so many. But to me, I think the most important thing that we do is, for not a lot of money, you get a report from us, and it's customized just for your site. It's totally confidential, so the world doesn't get to see all of your things that get criticized. You know, we don't trot out all your mistakes and dead ends and things that the judges find. Only you get to see that. And as Francois just said, I compiled them, but it's based on 5 totally independent judges. The judges don't confer about this. They do vote. They all submit their scores, but we do a simple mathematical average for that. So you get those average scores in 22 areas compared to all the other people in the competition's average scores in those 22 areas. It's objective feedback, it's benchmarking, all rolled into one. And, you can deal with your team on it and kick whatever behinds you need to kick, or give people accolades or take them all out to dinner, whatever is appropriate. But, you get to do this really in private, and you get to understand where you are. Now, I have obviously a biased view. I write them, I write it on the judges to get all that information. we did upgrade and we now add a lot more judges' comments than we used to. We changed that a couple of years ago. But I'd like to hear from you what you think of those reports.
I find them completely invaluable, right? So as you said, it comes from very esteemed, very accomplished folks, and even though they may not know everything, they know a lot. Because they are working with, I guess they're working with startups, they're working with established companies, and they have over time, and this is evolving as well, but they have figured out what the best practices are at any given time. So when I get that report, not only do I look at my report and all of the things that have been said about the website, right? What's good, what are some opportunities, but also the highlights of the other winners, right? So in terms of what they are doing, and there may be a bulb that goes off in your head to say, aha, I didn't even think of that. That makes sense, right? And especially for folks that are my peers or my competitors, similar size or in similar industry, I definitely pay a little bit more attention to see, where are they doing well, and what can I, shamelessly copy, because imitation is definitely the best form of flattery, right? So no, I found those reports very, very valuable, and that's the reason I think we've done this when we thought it was appropriate, and we intend to do so in the future as well.
Well, as I mentioned, the individual site reports are only for each individual entrant, but there are 2 reports that we published as well. That's for anybody that wants them, and that's one that talks about the trends and how the competition went that year. Another one that talks about the numbers. It's basically a benchmarking report, so that if you want to compare, how the companies did in the different 22 areas, help to figure out for yourself what should be most important for your site, things like that. Those are contained in 2 different reports. They're free to our members and available at a very minimal. Right now, it's $400 to buy one of those if you're not a member. But in any case, I'm going to open us up. I have more questions that I'm going to ask you, but I'm going to open us up as well to questions from our listeners. Because they're probably going to either fall asleep or hang up on us pretty soon if we don't let them have a word in edgewise. But I'll keep talking with you, but then we'll look, and feel free to chime in with questions. In fact, let me give you a few seconds of dead air on our side just to say, anybody have a question? Just go ahead and say it. I know you have to unmute if you've muted.
Well, this is David from MathWorks, and I think it's a great discussion, first off. I think my quick question is, so, a while ago, we merged our support content with the community, and it's been, I think it's been a thing of beauty, but to each of their own. I guess the question is on the back end, are there anyone best practices that people have seen to bring that community, loveliness, that gold mine to their development teams, and what practices do just generally have people seen in that space?
Well,
Are you
I mean,
talking about,
community-
David, are you worried about getting participation from the development team into the community? I'm not sure I understand your question.
Oh, great question. Yeah, so good way to clarify. So it's more around, so the question and answering from the community has already happened. And we're starting to kind of, if you will, group it together to bring it to certain development teams, but trying to get that connection so they can respond with the product changes potentially, or maybe documentation changes. So it's on the kind of that closing that loop on the product. It'd be interesting to see what best practices that people have considered that.
Yeah, I mean, community management best practices in general are what you've got to be really on top of, because you've put your authorized formal vendor solutions and your community together. And so, not that that's an inherent kind of structural problem, I think it elevates your need for really good community management best practices. There's a group out there called FeverBee that I think champions community best practices that I've had my team follow. They even own, they even have kind of a certification track. But the reality is that I think within a community, you want the vision of that to be a window into your company. And so if I come to a window of any house and I look in, I don't necessarily see everything, right? I can only see what's presented in the window. And that's the way you need to think about your community. And so if they walk up to the window and they don't see any voice from product, and that's what you want to be there, then you have to kind of curate that and present that voice. And it's not going to, it's not going to happen overnight. You have to build up a trust there that says, hey, I'm a customer. I came in, I gave you information on your product. You did nothing on it. I'm not going to come back and tell you that again, right? And so slowly but surely, I think that the trick there is that if you've moved everything into your, self-service content and workflows and community all on one site, then it really ups the ante that you got to have good community management to make sure that all those navigation pathways are facilitated properly, that you have good responses, you have good resolutions, and most importantly, you really project that window into your company as best as you possibly can.
Yeah, I think, David, the only thing I would add maybe to what Ryan commented on, because I thought it was a really good summary, is I would say, if you're thinking about like community, like forum type communities, you might want to think about how you use like something like AI/ML to do metadata tagging such that you can represent that community experience along with every other kind of experience you want to bring back to that engineering team for, because I'm assuming you're talking about something like supportability improvements, whether they be documentation or product, right? So you can think about metadata tagging, because what you really want to do is show your engineering organization, if they're not going to participate in the community, you want to show them the entire picture of the customer experience. And that's really a key.
Yeah, so just to add to that, when I think about the community, right, online community is definitely part of it. But in terms of vendor engagement with customers and partners, we also have the concept of live communities, right? So we've got user groups, we've got the customer advisory boards, technical advisory boards, etc., which are both on a regional and on a geographical basis. And when there is a good idea that comes out, right, either internally or from a community, etc., that's one way to validate it, is to float that and see how much interest there is in that, and those then might become product features. And definitely our product managers are involved very heavily, right? So we can take something from the community and create a feature, but they're also engaged live in all of these customer boards as well as the user groups, and the ideas that come from that and the validated ideas then become kind of a pipeline for ideas of what needs to go into either the product, the website, wherever it is, again, to reduce friction for the customers.
I've had some clients who've had really good luck having facilitated live sessions with product managers. So, 4 p.m. on Tuesday, you can just log on and you can just have a discussion. It could be chat-based, right? It doesn't need to be audio. And that seems to be very popular and good on both sides, right? It makes customers pretty happy to be able to express themselves, and also the product managers are like, oh, I didn't know they did this. I'm like, oh, okay, well, we've been telling you, but now you heard from the horse's mouth, and now you believe it, right?
Okay, do we have any other questions? Giving them time to unmute.
Looks like Deepak has raised his hand.
Actually,
if I did, I did that by accident.
Actually, I got a question, Al. So my question is, when things go south, right? Or I'll give you maybe a specific scenario of all of a sudden we were pointing people to a KB article that turned out to hurt them more than help them, or something like that. What kind of practices do you put in place to identify those quicker and resolve them quicker? Because I would imagine that that's got to be some kind of a problem that you run into from time to time, or is this just not ever happen?
I might cheat with the easy answer on that, Dennis, is I would say KCS, you're going to find that pretty fast, right? You're going to get feedback on the fact that something that you published in the KCS doesn't work. And you've got the mechanism to drive revisions in it very, very quickly as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're not having that happen every once in a while, you're probably not publishing stuff fast enough. I think, you never want to put out anything with bad quality, but at the same time, I think to think that you're going to put out perfect content is impossible. It's literally an impossible goal. And so I think the reality is that, you have to have feedback mechanisms that you listen to and monitor with extreme, passion and diligence, because you can't, once you do that, once you go down that road and you publish things fast and you're kind of sharing broadly and rapidly, at the same time, you have to be willing to learn. And one thing that you found was a solution in one particular scenario, maybe the variables slightly change and you get a slightly different response. And so, having the advantage of hardening that solution like we did in the old days before it was published perfectly, you can do that. But the problem is you won't have enough content, relevant content, for people to get any value out of your site. So it's really, I think, a balancing act of responding quickly and learning fast and making sure that the quality is as high as you possibly can, but at the same time, being willing and open with people to trust that they are co-creating with you, right? They're not just blindly taking the answers that you do and applying them. So they're kind of going through it in a cagey manner and, hey, this doesn't sound right. Let me ask this question before I apply it. So I think it's a, trust on your part and good feedback mechanisms, but at the same time, some sort of balance that you're trying to strike with how to make sure that you learn as fast as possible.
Yeah, and I think Ryan alluded to this tangentially, right? But just because you created a community, you can't divorce yourself from it, right? So the vendor has to still invest resources in there, make sure that the community is live and kicking, and that threads just don't die because nobody responded to it, right? So you have to have some folks involved, making sure that they keep reinvigorating those threads, getting the solutions, etc. And if bad advice is provided by someone, then you want to absolutely catch it very quickly and nip it in the bud. Otherwise, even though you put all the legal disclaimers, etc., to say, hey, the advice is provided by community members and the vendor is not responsible for it, really, ultimately word of mouth, etc., Twitter, all the other social media, your company is potentially going to get part of the bad name, right? In terms of, oh, I tried the solution, it didn't work. In fact, it deleted my data, etc. So you want to be very careful, and you want to make sure that you're not being overly draconian, at the same time that you are engaged in the community and making sure that all the right things are being done there.
So that's a good test for all of us, right? If a customer tomorrow finds something that's wrong on the website, how do they report it? Who takes care of it? And how long is it going to take for you to fix it? And if the answer is we don't know, or it's going to take a week, or even if it's going to take a day, that's not right. You need to have something that can react immediately, right?
Yeah, the leverage of the community works for you and against you both, right?
Yeah, I mean, if nobody is looking at what's happening in the community, right? The community may be discussing, like, this doesn't seem quite right. If you're not there, right, and if there's no way for them to say, hey, we think we have a problem, then it will never get fixed. I not infrequently find typos in particular on my customers' websites, right? So I tell them, I said, there's a typo. And most of the time, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, the typo's still there, right? I'm like, okay, well, there's no fix mechanism here.
And actually, I think that's a really, so that's a great, and that little example, that's a great thing as an industry that we need to evolve to, because, I can say everywhere I've been, we've had to invest time, energy, and money into those feedback loops, because when you start to operate at scale and you're looking at thousands of pieces of content on millions of page views, it does become a math problem, right? There's only so many times in a day, so much time a day, there's only some people. And so you got to figure out ways that you can respond to this feedback quickly. And it could be typos, it could be big stuff like, hey,
Yeah,
this
I was saying
just,
typos because I'm an idiot and I can't see anything
no,
but typos. But
but
yeah,
it's all the same, right? I mean, it's just flowing in. So you got to figure out a way. How do you stay on top of that? And I think that from a SaaS solution vendor, like a lot of times feedback, a lot of time is thrown into email, and that's all that happens, right? And really, you need to almost treat it like a case. Like if Francois says, hey, you got a typo, that's an open obligation to fix it. And until you close it, that's you've not met your obligation. And that's you have to like kind of formally treat it that way. It's not just an email to an inbox that somebody's going to look at every once in a while.
Yeah, Scott, one of the first things you said today was that you have to figure out the resources behind the support, right? I think this goes back to that. If you don't resource somebody to fix the typos and fix them right now, they're not going to get fixed.
actually, I would say, this is KCS, right? If you resource one person to fix typos, you'll never get it done. If you allow a lot of people to fix issues, then you might get it done. So that's something to think about, right?
That's right.
Yeah, it's a good point, Francois. And I think as we think about kind of how we resource things like our customer portal organization, our documentation organization, and taking feedback from those, it does, for us, it does very much generate a case, and the team goes and follows up on a case. So it is key to have all of those resources as well. I think KCS takes a whole organization and doing the principles and doing it right. I think will solve it for you when you have typos in those types of scenarios. But if you have a website typo or a documentation typo or something like this, that seems like a pretty easy resolution, you should make it an easy resolution for your customers and something they see that's a very timely resolution as well.
Okay, we have time for maybe one more question. So anybody else want to weigh in or not? I'll give you a minute to unmute. Okay, I will give you the last question then. I asked earlier, and actually Ryan segued this a little bit, but I asked about what it takes to put together a good website. Now I'll switch it and say, what's it take? And we got to just concentrate on the most important things. What's most important to create a great self-service support website? What differentiates the good ones from the great ones?
I can go first because I haven't gone first yet. So I'll give you three. So I think you got to design for humans, right? So that user-centered design is critical. You can't be utilitarian. You got to design for people because that's who's using your website. I think you got to be content rich. I think you got to share rapidly, fast, everything we're talking about. If you can share out, 90% of what the support organization knows as fast as you possibly can, that's what you're aiming for. That's what the best practice is in the industry, and that's what makes it great. And then the last thing I'd say is, I like to think of the world through channels, not necessarily limited to like community. I don't think they're good descriptors, but I like to think of the world in kind of the 5 channels of support: one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many. That's your core 3. But then I think you got to get into detect and predict. And then if you can get into in-product design, you're going to be a great digital support offering. And it's not just a support site, it's probably a encompassing digital support. So those are my 3.
Great ones. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Ryan covered everything that I was going to say, right? So overall, you've got to minimize the friction between the user and the vendor, right? So whatever it takes, easy navigation, great search, et cetera, right? Is how do you get the solution, the right solution to the customer the fastest? And part of that is extreme personalization, right? So not give them generic best practices, but knowing who the customer is the moment that they are coming into your website, and then be able to give them not just when they come in, but even overall, right? A lot of other products in the IT industry, especially hardware, have the call home feature, right? So knowing about that, right? So being able to provide them very pinpoint advice on, you need to change this, or we've had 7 customers running exactly your same stack that had an issue. Please upgrade your firmware, blah, 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 to XYZ so that you don't have the problem in the future, right? So to me, the continuum of support is the reactive to proactive to predictive to preemptive, right? So preemptive is mostly built in the product. Reactive, of course, through the support agents, etc. It's those middle two, to me, that are the key tenets for the online support that we need to focus on and make sure that we make the customer experience very delightful.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I love what kind of Ryan and Deepak have highlighted here. I would add to Ryan's to simply say kind of his 5 channels, kind of the experience you give a customer, and all of those needs to be the same experience, right? So you almost need to make it transparent or invisible to the customer. Okay, maybe I'm in product resolution, but that maybe extends all the way to your website as well. And they can't tell when they make that transition. It feels seamless to them. And I think I would add maybe to Deepak's, and I would say almost a concept of self-healing, right? Can when you do that detection, can a product self-heal? The best issue that a customer ever will have was one that they don't even know they had, right? And you can then take the experience from that and say, hey, look how we self-healed these issues in your environment, and tell that story to your customers as well. And it's a value proposition for your organization. And it's one that's even stronger because you're essentially wowing your customer at that point with something they didn't even really know they were experiencing.
Okay.
I love what the other guy said. So I'm trying to think of something a little bit different. I can tell you from a judge's perspective, what we like in a great website is something extra, something we haven't seen before. Like this really cool troubleshooting guide, or this very wonderful way to pick a product first, so that then I have a personalized experience. So that's what's shiny. So it's a lot harder to understand that as a judge, right? But your customers do know that, and you will know whether you have a great website because they will come up to you and tell you that. So talk to your customers. Do not just rely on the judges. We judges are really mostly looking at pre-stuff. We cannot really make a good assessment of your content or the tasks that users typically want to do or whatever. But I can tell you, we are very impressed by cool stuff. No two ways about it.
We, I think we have sort of a checks and balances there, in that the 22 areas that you score are pretty cut and dried, pretty much. I mean, there's some wiggle room in there for how you interpret various things, but you can't do 21. You can't add a 24th one. So judges are scoring those things. Their comments, they can make anything as a comment, and we now get nominations from them for ASP Best, and those can be for innovative ideas. Those can fall basically anywhere. So we have room for a little more recognition by the judges for innovation in terms of their nominations. And certainly in their comments, they can comment on things, but the scoring, pretty much, you got to, there's 1,000 points overall. You have to award them proportionally according to the 22 areas and with the weight that they're given. So that ensures some consistency and objectivity, but we also have room for judges like Francoise who want to add more. For giving all of your time today. And thank all of you for hanging in there and listening a little longer than the schedule said, but Dennis and Paul told me that they didn't really need as much time as they had, so I purposely allowed it to run over a bit. So thank you, everyone, and Dennis or Paul, back to you.
Great, thanks, Al, and I think Paul, you got a couple slides. Thank you for the panel. Very insightful stuff, guys.
Oh, yeah.
That was really, really good. So thank you for doing that. Paul, you got, I think you